Hey, welcome back to our program. You know, our part of the country is still reeling because of the terrible tornado tragedy that happened. We're reeling because of all kinds of weather throughout this country right now. Wildfires out in California, the flooding that's going on. Cairo, Illinois being evacuated this week, the rivers rising down where I live. A great deal of concern. There was estimated last Wednesday 173 tornadoes. That's a record for a single storm system. That many tornadoes took place throughout the South, from Mississippi clear on over to Georgia. You had tornadoes, quite frankly, in a number of states. Up in New York, you had tornado sightings. So it was a terrible, terrible week, the wildest month of weather in U.S. history. So far this year, some 900 tornado sightings have been reported, according to the government Storm Projection Center, and that's way above the figure that anyone has ever recorded so far. No April on record has ever surpassed 267 twisters, and now we're up to much more above that. Devastation down there. 340 people so far killed in 6 states, 250 in Alabama alone. I imagine that total is going to go on up a lot more. One of the problems that we have such a hard time understanding is the short notice. I mean, this tornado, there were warnings out there on television, on the radio, but this devastating tornado, because of the crosswinds and a very complicated formula as to just what happened, the warm water in the Gulf of Mexico, high winds going 150 miles an hour up in the jet stream, all of a sudden it was the perfect storm that allowed this one tornado to hit, lasted 3 to 5 seconds, and caused this massive damage that took place throughout the Deep South. So huge, huge tragedy. I know something about the insurance, having been insurance commissioner down in Louisiana. I've talked to some of my former cohorts in Alabama, my friend Mike Weaver over in Alabama, George Dale over in Mississippi, both served as insurance commissioners in those respective states, and we talked about the damage. We're estimating about $5 billion of insured losses. Now, the problem is in poorer areas like where this storm hit, those folks just didn't have insurance. You know, property insurance has become almost unaffordable in my state of Louisiana as throughout the Gulf South. So much of the damage was not insured. Was all is said and done, we're projecting anywhere from $15 to $20 billion of overall damage. And again, only $5 billion insured losses. That means there's going to be pressure for insurance rates to go up, number one. And number two, there will be no recompensation to many of these folks. Now, following Katrina, you saw mitigation. I think you'll see the same thing there, to where a lot of these people will be able to get grants and low-income loans to rebuild their homes. When they do so, by the way, I think the lesson learned is if you can put a cellar in, that's the way to do it for something. It's a freak accident, but it sure would have paid off. The best example is The Wizard of Oz. When Dorothy can't get down into the storm cellar, and she pulls and pulls, and her parents are all, her family is all saved because they went down that storm cellar. That's the best protection by far. The second best protection, if you're building a new house, as I'm seeing many of my friends down this part of the country do, is to put a shelter in the center of your house. You take a closet, you take something like that and reinforce it with concrete. Put 1-foot concrete walls all the way around it. That would, now the problem is, in this storm, that would not have made any difference. But in most storms, 95% of the storm, that concrete barrier would serve as the best protection. You know how they tell you always go get in the closet? Well, that would be the protection you'd get in the closet that would be protected by concrete, and that would have made a huge, huge difference in saving lives. So, terrible tragedy. And the other good news is it looks like the federal government has gotten its act together. I don't want to blame Republicans or Democrats on this. You go back to Katrina, and I can tell you horror stories about Katrina. My brother-in-law happens to be the sheriff down in the lower part of Louisiana, what is called Plaquemine Parish. You folks watching that live in other parts of the country have counties. We have parishes down here. Because of the Catholic French influence, we call them parishes, same as your counties. In any event, he was located in the deepest part of the southern state, the most southern tip. The storm hit. They waited day after day for federal response. Nothing came. No one showed up. The Canadian Mounted Police Get this now, folks. The Canadian Mounted Police made it to Plaquemine Parish before the first federal soldier representative of any kind was able to come down there. Just shows you how out of sync it was. We had Michael Brown, by the way. Remember that? Hey, you're doing a great job, Brownie. Had him on the show here about a year ago. And, of course, he gives a very hard-hitting defense, saying it was not his fault that the system broke down, was never put in place. And, again, you can look at Democrats and Republicans, and over the years, FEMA has not done a very good job. Hopefully, we've learned a pretty good lesson, because it looks like in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, the Smithfield, Mississippi lost 15 lives, wiped out the entire town. All those areas got some pretty decent federal response so far, and I certainly hope that continues. Those folks really do need the help during this very trying, difficult time. Lessons to be learned in terms of protecting yourself, because as we saw, these tornadoes hit all over the country. It wasn't just the Deep South. We talked about New York. Need a storm cellar if you're going to build a new house? Cellar's the best, if not reinforced concrete in the center of the house. Just some good advice from you, and we hope it'll make a difference. You'll never have to use something like that. Hey, we'll come back right after this message.